The Phantom Musician of the Old Opera House, Hercule Poirot Case. Hi there, welcome back to Haunting Vales. Tonight's mystery begins in an opera house long past its glory. A place where velvet curtains gather dust, and echoes linger longer than footsteps. For years, people have whispered about a phantom musician. A haunting melody that drifts through the empty halls, long after the final audience has gone home. Most believe it's superstition. Some say it's grief trapped in the rafters. But when a celebrated soprano is found dead, moments after rehearsing alone on stage, the phantom stops being a story and becomes a suspect. Hercule Poirot is called to investigate, and he quickly discovers that behind the music lies jealousy, betrayal, and a secret that refuses to stay buried. Because in the old opera house, nothing is ever truly silent. Not even murder. Before we follow Poirot into the shadows of the stage, don't forget to subscribe for more haunting mysteries on Haunting Vales. Chapter 1: The Phantom in the Wings. The rain had soaked the stone steps of the old opera house long before evening settled across the city. A dim silver light ran along the wet pavement as thin clouds slid over the moon, leaving broken shadows that shifted like restless spirits. The opera house loomed at the end of the quiet street, its towering pillars and cracked marble facade glowing faintly beneath the street lamp. It looked both magnificent and forgotten, the kind of place where memories lingered even after the world had moved on. Hercule Poirot arrived just after 7. His shoes clicked softly on the puddled walkway as he looked up at the opera house with calm curiosity. Time had wounded the building, but the proud structure refused to bow. He inhaled slowly, then stepped beneath the high archway. Inside, the air was cold enough to make him tighten his coat around his shoulders. Poirot did not come here for a show. The old opera house had not hosted a performance in more than 20 years. Tonight, he came because someone claimed a phantom musician had returned to haunt the stage. Not a ghost, Poirot did not indulge such ideas, but something, or someone, hiding behind a curtain of fear. He pushed open the worn doors and entered the vast lobby. The chandelier that once bathed the room in golden light now hung lifeless, its crystals coated in dust. A faint draft crept across the tiled floor, stirring old flyers that had curled with age. The silence pressed in like a hand against the ear. Poirot paused, observing the room with steady eyes. Then came the sound that had brought him here, a single musical note, long and low, drifting through the air like a dark promise. It came from deep within the opera house, rising and fading with eerie precision. A man appeared from the shadows near the grand staircase. He was tall, thin, and carried a lantern that shook in his grip. "Detective Poirot?" he asked. Poirot nodded. "You must be Henry Ward, the caretaker." Henry stepped closer, lowering his voice as if afraid the walls might hear him. "Thank you for coming. I swear I wouldn't bother you unless it was real. The people in town laugh at me, but I know what I heard. The music, it's coming from the stage, and no one has stepped foot on that stage in years." Poirot studied him for a moment. "And you are certain the sound is not caused by wind, animals, loose pipes?" Henry swallowed. "I know this place better than anyone alive. This music isn't wind. It isn't pipes. It's a piano. And whoever is playing it knows exactly what they're doing. Another note drifted out, soft and trembling. Poirot turned toward the dark hallway that led to the backstage area. "Show me." Henry nodded and guided Poirot through the lobby. Their footsteps echoed up the grand staircase. Dust rose with each step, swirling in the lantern light like slow-moving snow. The air only grew colder as they climbed. "We sealed off the stage after the collapse," Henry said quietly. "The roof cracked during a storm. One of the old beams snapped. No one was hurt, thank God, but they closed the building for good." He paused at the landing. "That was 23 years ago." Poirot eyed the long hallway ahead. "And yet someone has found a way inside." Henry hesitated before answering. "I don't know." They passed rows of faded portraits, smiling performers caught forever in their prime. Their eyes seemed to follow Poirot as he walked. The sound of the piano grew clearer, the melody weaving a slow, mournful pattern that echoed down the hall. Henry stopped at a door with a rusted handle. "This leads backstage," he whispered. Poirot pushed the door open. A stale smell of damp wood and forgotten costumes drifted out. Past the doorway waited a narrow corridor filled with ropes, broken set pieces, and tangled curtains. The shadows here seemed thicker, as though the building itself was holding its breath. Poirot walked slowly, letting the lantern sweep the ground in wide arcs. The floor creaked beneath them, complaining softly as they passed. To their left, a dressing room door was half open. Poirot glanced inside. A cracked mirror leaned against the wall, catching the lantern's glow and throwing a pale reflection across the floor. Henry watched Poirot's expression. "The music usually stops the moment I get close," he said. "Like someone knows I'm here." Poirot raised a brow. "And yet tonight it continues." Henry nodded nervously. "Yes." The piano played on, steady and sorrowful. The melody carried a quiet intensity, as if someone were speaking through it. Poirot recognized the emotion, loneliness. But there was also discipline in the rhythm, a skill that did not belong to an amateur. They reached the end of the corridor. Henry lifted the lantern, revealing a heavy curtain. The music was just beyond it. Poirot touched the fabric and felt it tremble faintly as the notes rolled through it. He stepped forward and pulled the curtain aside. The backstage area opened before them, a wide space filled with abandoned props and half-collapsed scenery. Some sets leaned dangerously to one side. Others had fallen entirely, leaving the room cluttered with wooden boards and broken plaster. And at the far end stood the grand piano. Its black surface was cracked. Several pieces of trim were missing. But the keys gleamed faintly in the lantern light, almost as if someone had cleaned them recently. Poirot approached slowly. The piano played on. But no one sat at the keys. Henry stumbled back in shock. "No, no, that's impossible." Poirot raised a hand to silence him. He moved closer, inspecting the piano carefully. The lid was open, exposing the strings. The hammers rose and fell with perfect rhythm, as if invisible hands pressed the keys. The melody climbed higher, drifting like smoke toward the ceiling. Poirot circled behind the piano. His eyes narrowed. Then he noticed something else, a faint vibration running through the wooden floorboards beneath his feet. He knelt, touching the floor with the tips of his fingers. The vibration pulsed in time with the melody. Henry whispered, "What is it?" Poirot stood. "There is a mechanism beneath the stage," he said. "Someone has engineered this. The keys are being struck from below." Henry frowned. "But who? And why? I'm the only one with keys to this place." Poirot placed a hand on the piano's edge. "Someone is going to great lengths to keep you afraid, and perhaps to keep others away as well." Then, without warning, the music stopped. The silence that followed was enormous. Poirot and Henry froze. The air felt tight, as if the building braced itself for something. A slow, heavy thud echoed from beneath the stage. Henry backed away. What was that? Poirot stepped closer to the piano, listening. Another thud followed, then another, steady, deliberate, like footsteps coming from the wood beneath their feet. Henry grabbed Poirot's sleeve. "We need to go." Poirot shook his head. "Running will only delight whoever is playing with us." But a sharp crack split the silence, wood snapping, loud enough to make both men jump. The sound came from somewhere deep below, in the old storage passages beneath the stage. Henry whispered, "The lower rooms, no one goes down there anymore. The foundation is weak. You can get lost." Poirot stared at the floorboards. "Then that is precisely where the answers lie." A sudden gust of air swept across the stage, powerful enough to rattle the curtains. The lantern flickered wildly. Henry tightened his grip on the handle, his face pale. Poirot looked upward. High above, in the darkness of the upper scaffolding, a shadow flashed past, a swift movement, barely more than a blur, but enough to catch his attention. Something, or someone, had been watching them. Henry gasped. "Did you see that?" Poirot did not answer at first. He stared into the dark rafters, the massive beams that crisscrossed the ceiling like the ribs of a slumbering giant. Then the music returned. This time, the piano played a different melody, faster, urgent, like a warning. Poirot stepped back from the piano. This is no random trick. Someone is trying to communicate. Henry shook his head. But what do they want? Poirot answered quietly, "For us to follow." The piano lid slammed shut with a violent crack, startling them both. Poirot turned to Henry. "Take me to the lower levels." Henry hesitated, trembling. "Detective, I don't think anyone should go down there." Poirot met his eyes. "If we turn back now, the phantom wins." After a moment, Henry nodded. "All right. But stay close. It's dangerous." They crossed the backstage area, stepping over fallen props and weaving between broken pieces of scenery. The air grew heavy with dust and damp wood. The lantern's glow cast long shadows that crept across the floor like whispering figures. Henry reached a small iron door, half hidden behind a collapsed backdrop. He pulled it open, revealing a narrow staircase that spiraled downward into darkness. A cold breath of air drifted up from below, carrying the smell of stone and something else, something faint and metallic. They descended slowly. The lantern's light danced along the tight walls, revealing old posters tacked to the stone. One showed a smiling pianist, her hands poised above the keys. Another displayed a crowded audience, frozen in applause. All of them were cracked and faded, as if time had drained the life from them. About halfway down, Henry whispered, "There used to be storage rooms, dressing rooms, even rehearsal spaces down here. But after the collapse, they blocked off the paths." Poirot continued downward. Blocked does not mean abandoned. At the bottom, the staircase opened into a long corridor. The ceiling was low, the walls lined with old pipes and peeling paint. Their footsteps echoed up and down the hall. Then came a sound, soft, steady, metallic. A tapping rhythm. Poirot raised a hand to stop Henry. Tap, tap, tap. The rhythm was slow, deliberate. Like someone striking metal gently, again and again. Poirot followed the sound. The corridor grew colder. The air seemed to pulse with the faint tremor of the tapping. They reached a door at the far end, a heavy wooden door with deep claw-like scratches across its surface. Henry whispered, "That wasn't here before." Poirot touched the handle, then slowly pushed it open. Inside was a wide room filled with broken crates, dusty costumes, and ancient stage equipment. The tapping stopped the moment they stepped in. Poirot moved carefully through the room, scanning the walls and the floor. The lantern light trembled as Henry's hand shook. Then Poirot saw it. A large trunk sat in the corner. Its lid was slightly ajar. And from the gap, a thin line of light flickered, like something glowing inside. Poirot approached the trunk. "Detective," Henry whispered nervously. Poirot placed both hands on the lid and lifted it. Inside sat a small mechanical device, gears, wires, and thin rods connected to a long metal plate. And attached to it was a thick cable that ran along the floor, disappearing beneath the wall. Henry gasped. "What on earth is that?" Poirot studied it closely. "This is the source of the tapping. And perhaps the piano mechanism above. Someone has built an elaborate system beneath the stage." Henry shook his head. "But why? Why would anyone go through so much trouble?" Poirot stared at the cable disappearing into the wall. "To send a message," he said quietly. "Or to hide one." Before Henry could respond, a distant sound echoed through the corridor, the mournful piano melody once again rising from the stage above them. But now it sounded different. It sounded angry. Poirot straightened. "Someone knows we are here." Henry's lantern flickered out. The room fell into darkness. And somewhere behind them, something began to breathe. Chapter 2: The music below the floor. Darkness swept across the room the instant the lantern went out. It was so complete, so absolute, that for a moment Poirot felt as though the entire world had vanished. He lifted one hand slowly, brushing the air in front of him, but could not see even the faintest outline of his own fingers. Henry gasped somewhere to his right. "Detective, where are you? I can't see a thing." "Stay calm," Poirot said in a steady voice. "Do not move." The breathing in the room grew louder, a slow inhale followed by a long exhale, measured, patient, almost amused. Poirot listened closely, turning his head just enough to follow the sound. Something was in the room with them. A soft scrape dragged across the floor, as if a foot slid forward, testing the ground. Poirot stood perfectly still. His senses sharpened in the dark. He could feel the cold stone beneath his shoes. He could taste the dust in the air. And he could hear the steady throb of Henry's heartbeat, fast, frightened, uneven. Poirot spoke quietly. "Henry, do not run. Whatever is with us wants fear." Henry whispered, "How do you know?" "Because it has chosen darkness," Poirot said. "If it wished to attack, it already would." The breathing shifted slightly. A faint sound of cloth brushing cloth echoed near the far wall. Poirot followed it carefully, letting his ears guide him like lanterns. Then, without warning, something struck the metal trunk beside them. The loud clang made Henry jump. Poirot remained still. A second later, a ring of cold air brushed past Poirot's arm, as if someone had walked by him silently. Henry whispered, "Detective, it just touched me." Poirot listened again. The breathing was gone. The room had returned to complete silence. Then, somewhere above them, the piano began to play again. The first note was soft, but not gentle. It landed like a warning, echoing through the floorboards. The second note followed, then a third, faster and faster until the melody swelled into a frantic, almost violent rhythm. Henry clutched the lantern tightly. "Detective, what do we do? Please tell me you have a plan." Poirot stepped forward, his hands outstretched. "First, we restore light." He moved slowly across the room, feeling the air change as he neared the trunk. He knelt, searching for the lantern in the dark. His fingers brushed cold metal. He traced the outline, found the switch, and twisted it. The lantern burst back into life with a shaky glow. Dust swirled upward in the sudden light like a cloud of tiny insects. Henry blinked rapidly. "Oh, thank God, thank God." Poirot raised the lantern higher, sweeping the room with its soft glow. Nothing moved. Nothing breathed. Yet the piano above them continued to pour out a frenzied melody that beat against the ceiling like rushing blood. Poirot exhaled slowly. Whatever was here is gone for now. Henry swallowed hard. "You think it was a person, don't you? That someone was right next to us?" Poirot nodded. "Yes. Someone who knows these tunnels well. Someone who can move through them without sound." Henry's lantern cast a faint light across the far wall. Something caught Poirot's attention, a small, nearly invisible crack in the stone. He walked toward it, running his fingertips along the surface. The crack formed a thin outline, almost like a hidden doorway. He pressed gently. A soft click echoed through the room. The stone panel slid open. Henry stepped back, stunned. "There's a secret door? I've worked here for years and never saw that." Poirot peered into the darkness beyond the opening. Someone wanted it kept hidden. And they have succeeded. Behind the panel was a narrow passageway, no wider than a single person. The walls were made of rough stone, and the ceiling dipped low enough that Poirot had to bow his head slightly to avoid scraping it. Henry shook his head. "Detective, I don't think we should go in there. Please, let's go back upstairs. We're not safe." Poirot looked at him. "We are not safe anywhere until we understand who is behind these events." Henry hesitated. "But this place, it feels wrong." Poirot placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Fear is often greatest just before the truth is found." Henry took a slow breath, then nodded. "All right. Lead the way. I'm right behind you." They stepped into the hidden passage, the lantern's glow illuminating the rough stone as they moved deeper inside. The walls closed in around them, and the sound of the piano above dimmed to a faint echo. The passage twisted sharply to the left, then sloped downward. Water dripped from the ceiling, landing in shallow puddles along the floor. The air grew colder with every step. Henry hugged his arms tightly. "It feels like we're going under the street, maybe even under the nearby buildings." Poirot nodded. "The opera house is older than the town believes. It was built on layers of older structures. This passage is likely part of the earliest foundation." The walls soon widened into a larger space, a forgotten chamber buried beneath the opera house. Old crates lined the walls. Dust-covered music stands lay scattered across the floor. And in the center stood a single object. A tall wooden wardrobe. It looked out of place, far too elegant for the underground chamber. Its polished wood gleamed faintly in the lantern light, untouched by dust. Henry frowned. "How did that get down here?" Poirot walked around it slowly. "More importantly, why would someone bring it here?" He reached for the handle. Henry whispered urgently, "Detective, maybe we shouldn't." Poirot pulled the door open. Inside the wardrobe hung a single coat. A long black coat with torn cuffs and faded edges. It looked like something an orchestra conductor might have worn long ago. Beneath it sat a pair of polished black shoes, almost new. Henry stepped back. "That's not mine. And no one else has reason to come down here." Poirot examined the coat carefully. "This is more than clothing. It is a costume. A disguise." Henry shivered. "A disguise for who?" Poirot answered quietly, "For the phantom." He touched the hem of the coat. It felt warm. "Recently worn." Henry whispered, "Detective, the person in here with us before, could they be the one wearing this?" Poirot nodded slowly. "Yes. And they cannot be far." Suddenly, the floor beneath them trembled. A distant rumble rolled through the chamber like thunder underground. Henry grabbed Poirot's arm. "What was that?" Poirot steadied himself. "The tunnels are old. Someone is moving something heavy, or activating another mechanism." The rumble grew louder, rising from the deeper passage ahead. The lantern flickered as dust shook loose from the ceiling. Poirot lifted the light. "Come. We must see where this leads." Henry hesitated. "Do we have to?" Poirot nodded. "If we turn back now, the phantom remains ahead of us." Together, they crossed the chamber and stepped through a low archway into another corridor. This one stretched much farther, lined with wooden beams that groaned softly under their own weight. The air was thick with the smell of earth and old stone. The rumbling continued, growing sharper, metallic, clanking, grinding, as if gears were turning somewhere deep below. Poirot slowed. "Do you hear that?" Henry nodded. "It sounds like machines." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Yes. And machines require someone to build them." They followed the sound, turning a corner into a long room filled with discarded machinery, rusted wheels, twisted metal rods, broken pulleys. Many pieces looked old enough to crumble at a touch, but some seemed newer, as if someone had recently placed them there. At the back of the room stood a workbench covered in tools, wrenches, screwdrivers, wire cutters, and a stack of neatly coiled cables identical to the one attached to the device near the trunk. Henry whispered, "Detective, someone is building something down here." Poirot examined the workbench closely. "Yes. Someone skilled. This is not the work of an amateur." As he brushed aside an empty spool, he found a small notebook. Its cover was blank, stained with oil. Poirot opened it carefully. Inside were pages filled with neat handwriting, diagrams of mechanical parts, sketches of piano keys, drawings of hidden chambers under the stage. Henry peered over his shoulder. "What does it say?" Poirot read slowly. "It describes a plan. A system designed to move sound, create illusions, and frighten anyone who enters the opera house." Henry blinked. "So someone built all this, just to scare me?" Poirot shook his head. "No. This is too elaborate for a simple prank. There is a deeper motive." Then he turned to the last page. A single sentence was written across it. "The truth is buried beneath the singer's room." Henry frowned. "The singer's room? You mean the old dressing room upstairs?" Poirot closed the notebook. "Yes. And someone is trying to keep us away from it." Before Henry could respond, a loud crash echoed from behind them, the sound of wood splintering, metal ringing, and something heavy falling. Poirot spun toward the doorway. Shadows moved. Fast. Very fast. Henry whispered, horrified, "Detective, someone is coming." Poirot raised the lantern high. "Stand behind me." Heavy footsteps pounded toward them, shaking the floorboards overhead. The sound grew louder, closer, until the very walls seemed to tremble. But just before the figure reached the doorway, the footsteps stopped. Silence fell. Poirot and Henry waited, hardly breathing. Then a single piano note rang out above them, sharp, violent, final. Henry whispered, "What does that mean?" Poirot lowered the lantern slowly. "It means," he said, "the phantom knows we are on the right path." The lantern flickered again. And from the darkened doorway, a low voice whispered, "Leave now." Chapter 3: The Final Note of the Phantom. The whisper drifted through the doorway like a cold wind. "Leave now." Henry froze. His breath hitched in his throat, and his hands trembled so violently that the lantern's glow shook against the walls. Poirot stepped forward, placing himself between Henry and the shadowed hall. "Show yourself," Poirot said calmly. Silence answered him. Not even the faint echo of movement returned. The whisper seemed to vanish into the stone, swallowed by the darkness of the tunnels. Henry clutched the lantern tighter. "Detective, please, we should go back. This isn't human. No one can move that fast." Poirot kept his eyes fixed on the doorway. "It is human, Henry. Someone who knows these tunnels intimately, someone who has built machines beneath your feet, someone who relies on fear to keep you away." The lantern flame steadied slowly as Henry forced a shaky breath. "Why me? Why the opera house? Why all this music?" Poirot lifted the notebook he had taken from the workbench. He tapped the final line with his finger. "The truth is buried beneath the singer's room." Henry swallowed. "The old dressing room." "Yes," Poirot said. "Whoever built this wants everyone away from that room. But the harder they push us back, the more certain I become that something important is hidden there." A sudden tremor shook dust from the ceiling. The grinding of gears began again, louder this time, echoing through the tunnels like the pounding of distant drums. The phantom had not only heard them, it was moving. And fast. Poirot steadied himself. "We must return to the surface. The answers lie above." Henry nodded, though fear gripped him with every step. Together they retraced their path through the tunnels. The passage behind them seemed to tighten, as if the walls themselves were closing in. Every shadow shifted. Every sound echoed twice. When they reached the hidden panel door, Poirot paused. He lifted the lantern slowly to study the edges of the stone. Something scratched the surface, deep grooves that had not been present before they entered. Henry whispered, "Detective, those weren't there, right?" Poirot touched one of the grooves. It was deep, forceful, made by someone strong, or someone angry. "Come," he said quietly. "There is no more time." They slipped through the hidden door and back into the main underground room. The piano above them thundered suddenly, playing a violent burst of notes that rattled the ceiling. Henry flinched. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "He wants us frightened." Henry whispered, "It's working." They climbed the narrow staircase, emerging behind the stage. The piano keys continued to strike themselves with unnatural force, the lid bouncing with each impact. The notes rose and fell in a storm of sound, angry, warning, almost pleading. Poirot stepped forward. "Enough," he shouted. The piano stopped instantly. A ringing silence stretched across the stage. Even the air seemed to freeze. Henry whispered, "Detective, it listened to you." Poirot moved closer. "Not me. He stopped because he knows I have seen the tunnels. His curtain is slipping." Poirot examined the piano once more, its inner strings trembling lightly from the last echo of the melody. Then he turned away. "To the singer's room," he said. Henry hesitated. "Do you think he will try to stop us?" Poirot nodded. "Without question." They moved through the backstage hall, the portraits watching them again from the walls, eyes frozen in perfect smiles, unaware of the long years that had turned applause into silence. When they reached the dressing room door, Henry paused. "This room, we kept it shut after the building closed." No one has been inside for 20 years. Poirot gripped the handle. Then someone believed it held something worth guarding. The door gave a soft groan as he pushed it open. Inside, dust coated every surface. The cracked mirror dominated one wall, and faded makeup containers lay scattered across a small table. A lonely chair sat in the center of the room, as if waiting for a performer who would never return. Poirot stepped inside. Henry remained at the doorway, too nervous to move. Poirot examined the walls first, then the floor. Something felt wrong, subtle, hidden, but present. The air in the room was different. Heavy. Almost expectant. He walked to the center and knelt. "The truth is buried," he murmured. Not metaphorically, not in the notebook's handwriting. Literally. Poirot tapped the floorboards with the handle of the lantern. The first 3 taps brought a solid sound. The fourth was hollow. Poirot glanced at Henry. "Bring me the crowbar from the backstage tool rack." Henry sprinted off, returning moments later with the tool. Poirot wedged it under the floorboard and pressed. The wood creaked. Then it snapped and lifted. He removed another plank, then another, until finally a small wooden box appeared beneath the floor. Its edges were carved with intricate patterns. Its lid bore a single symbol, a small rose, etched carefully into the wood as if placed there by trembling hands. Henry whispered, "Detective, what is that?" Poirot lifted the box slowly, brushing dust from the surface. It was surprisingly heavy. He opened it. Henry gasped when he saw inside. A stack of letters lay neatly arranged, each tied with a faded ribbon. Beneath them lay a bundle of sheet music, handwritten notes, elegant and careful. Under that lay a silver locket. Poirot lifted the first letter. The ink had faded, but the words remained clear. "For my daughter. If anything happens to me, this will reveal the truth." Henry frowned. "Daughter? Whose daughter?" Poirot opened the locket. Inside was a tiny photograph of a woman with gentle eyes, holding a small child in her arms. Behind them, faintly visible, was the old opera house during its golden years. Poirot turned the locket over. A name was carved into the back. Henry read it softly. Lucy Ward. Poirot looked up slowly. Henry's breath caught. "Detective, that's my mother's name." Poirot closed the locket carefully. "Then this truth belongs to you." Henry's hand shook as he reached for the stack of letters. He opened the top one. His eyes widened. His voice broke. She wrote these to me. But why were they hidden?" Poirot took one of the other letters and read it silently. Then he understood everything. He placed the letter down and spoke gently. "Henry, your mother did not leave the opera house because she wanted to. She left because someone forced her out. These letters reveal a secret, something she discovered backstage all those years ago. A secret someone believed dangerous enough to bury." Henry's voice trembled. "But what secret?" Poirot picked up the sheet music. The notes were beautiful, haunting, full of emotion. But the final page was different. It held no music. Only a name. A name written in large, hurried letters. Henry read it aloud. And then the air in the room changed. The piano above them struck a single note, loud enough to shake dust from the ceiling. Poirot stood slowly. "He knows you found the truth." Henry turned toward the door. "Detective, he's here." A figure stepped into the doorway. Tall. Thin. Dressed in the torn black coat from the underground wardrobe. The Phantom. But the face was not hidden by shadow now. It was visible under the lantern light. And Henry gasped. "Uncle David." The man's eyes burned with wild energy, but his face was unmistakable. Henry's uncle, believed dead for years after an accident below the stage. Poirot stepped forward. "Not dead. Hiding." Henry clutched the locket. "Why? Why would you do all this?" David's voice cracked with emotion. "Because your mother, she found the truth. The money stolen from the opera house, the forged accounts. She discovered everything. She was going to expose all of us. I tried to stop her, but she fought me. She fell. The accident wasn't an accident." Henry's face twisted in pain. "You killed her." David shook his head wildly. "I didn't mean to. It was an accident. But when I saw her fall, I panicked. I knew I would be blamed. So I hid. I built machines to scare everyone away. I lived in the tunnels. I only wanted to protect myself." Poirot's voice cut through the room like a blade. "You terrorized Henry for years. You lived in the shadows, letting him believe the building haunted. You chose fear over truth." David stepped back. "Stay away." Poirot shook his head. "No more hiding." David lunged for the doorway. Poirot was faster. He grabbed the coat, pulling David off balance. Henry dropped the lantern and rushed forward, helping Poirot restrain him. After a desperate struggle, David collapsed to his knees, defeated. Poirot breathed steadily. "It is over." Henry looked down at the man who had taken everything from him. His voice was soft. "Why didn't you just tell the truth?" David did not answer. Poirot placed a hand on Henry's shoulder. "You were never alone, Henry. Your mother left you the truth. And now you have found it." As they led David out of the opera house, the building seemed to exhale one final time. The air loosened. The shadows retreated. And the great silence of the old opera house returned to its rightful place. The phantom musician was gone. The truth had played its final note. And the opera house could finally rest. If you enjoyed this full-length Hercule Poirot mystery and want more original detective stories like this, make sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and drop a comment telling us what case Poirot or Miss Marple should solve next. Your support helps keep these mysteries coming every week.